This, of course, is part 2 of my 7-11 video, and a quick recap to start. Patrick Mahomes was visibly moved by artifact found in Ground Zero rubble. Mahomes, of course, plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, and they play at Arrowhead Stadium, where a World Cup game will be played on 7-11 this weekend. And before I move on, check out this breaking news. Bonnie Tyler, singer of the song Total Eclipse of the Heart, dead at 75. This, of course, connects to the solar eclipse of July 11th, 1991, which was exactly 12,784 days before 7-11 this year. Remember, the July 11th, 1991 total solar eclipse was a huge deal. In fact, it was dubbed the eclipse of the century. And again, it was known as the eclipse of the century for a reason, because it lasted for 6 minutes and 53.8 seconds at the point of maximum eclipse. There will not be a longer total eclipse until June 13th, 2132. This was the largest total solar eclipse of Solar Saros Series 136. That, of course, is the eclipse series that began 666 years before Trump's 80th birthday. So we just had the anniversary of that eclipse, and now this one will turn 12,784 days old on 7-11. So really, what better timing for this singer of Total Eclipse of the Heart to die? July 8th, 2026, in between the 666-year anniversary of the first ever Solar Saros eclipse and the 12,784-day anniversary of the eclipse of the century, which is part of that series. Not only that, but she died in Faro, Portugal. Faro, like an Egyptian pharaoh, and no, it's not spelled the same, but again, it's wordplay, and of course, Portugal has the portal in the name. And I had literally no idea that this creature died. I was just coming on here to do my part 2 and do a quick recap, and that was up there at the top of the page as breaking news. And that is how I discovered that she passed away. And it just goes perfectly hand in hand with my 7-11 videos. Because again, I cannot stress enough how important this solar eclipse of July 11th, 1991 was. Now back to my recap. This 3-inch Kansas City Chiefs football was supposedly discovered on a conveyor belt at Fresh Kills landfill. A conveyor belt full of victims of the 9/11/2001 attack. Pretty gruesome, right, to have a conveyor belt of victims' remains. And a cop named Michael Meyer decided to pocket this football, basically grave robbing. The former cop here, Michael Meyer. And this part is important to recap because Mahomes, along with his teammates, Travis Kelce, what just happened with him in New York, the supposed wedding to Taylor Swift, you know, that LaVey-related creature. They heard the bittersweet story behind the memento kept in a shadow box beneath Arrowhead Stadium. Well, remember that I tried searching for Michael Meyer the cop on Google and instead found this guy, a football player by the same exact name, same exact spelling and everything, who plays for the Las Vegas Raiders and was born July 6th, 2001, the 9/11 President George Bush Jr.'s birth date in the year of 9/11. Not only that, but that was 9,111 days before Davy Chase died, and she was in Donnie Darko, which premiered in 2001 on 1/19, the backwards 9/11. He plays for the Las Vegas Raiders. And Davy Chase is from Las Vegas. Again, man, she died 9,111 days after this Michael Meyer football player was born. He plays for the Las Vegas Raiders. No coincidence. No way. No way in hell is that a coincidence. Impossible. And Montegraph brought up the story of cop Michael Meyer finding the 9/11 Kansas City Chiefs football over the weekend, well after I talked about the date that was 9,111 days before Davy Chase was born. So, for this guy to wind up being born on that exact date is pure insanity. It's already insane enough that I'm finding another Michael Meyer who is a football player, and that he plays for Las Vegas, where Davy Chase is from. You know who else is from Las Vegas? Kyle Busch, who died in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where Irina Zarutska was murdered last year on August 22nd. North Carolina equals 888, just like Kansas City equals 888. Now, why did I say it was important to recap that this moron was one of those few present to see the 9/11 football? Not just because he supposedly just got married in New York. No, not just because of that. It's because he is number 87 for Kansas, and he is their tight end. Well, guess what? For the Las Vegas Raiders, Michael Meyer is number 87, and he is their tight end. Are you kidding me? Same exact numbers, same exact positions. And again, that football found by the cop Michael Meyer connects Kansas City and Arrowhead Stadium to 9/11. A very coded story, probably made up. And that's why we have two Michael Myers. This one, obviously so very connected to 9/11 himself. He was born on the 9/11 president's birthday in the year of 9/11, for crying out loud. And of course, the 9,111 day connection to Davy Chase. He plays for Las Vegas. She's from Las Vegas. In fact, he was the 35th pick of the 2023 NFL draft, and she died at the age of 35. Now, before I continue on with my recaps and other 7-Eleven connections, Bonnie Tyler, who just died, her real name was Gaynor Sullivan. 188 in reverse, that of course is Michelle Trachtenberg's number. 1016 Fibonacci, that's her upside down 9/11. 628, that's Elon Musk's birthday, but also when that French skydiving plane crashed. Just like there was a skydiving plane that crashed on Trump's birthday in Butler, Missouri. Do not forget that that is the date the first solar Saros eclipse turned 666 years old. She's saying total eclipse of the heart. 47. 64, which connects to both of the Michael Myers, as the football player is 6 foot 4 inches tall, and when that story was posted by the New York Post, the cop was 64 years old. 190 ordinal, which is the 147th composite. The Golden Gate Bridge opened on the 147th day of the year. Remember how many months the Golden Gate Bridge is old currently, and how that connects to our huge 1275 number. And 1128 is the 47th triangular. Stage name Bonnie Tyler, 751 in Latin. The 133rd prime, remember 133 connects to Kansas City through Emily Blunt, who also equals 133. She played a Kansas City meteorologist in Disclosure Day. 133 also equals Oklahoma City government hantavirus. 1201 standard, which is the 197th prime. That can be a 719, which is when the World Cup crap is supposed to end. Also Trump's reverse birth date. We also have a 58 and a 59, both important numbers. Remember all the stuff that happened on May 8th, and the 59th day of the year is 228, start of the Iran War, 158. Remember its composite is 205, Davy Chase, born on the 205th day of the year. And again, the creature was most famous for the song Total Eclipse of the Heart. The big eclipse on July 7th, 1991 was a total eclipse. Total eclipse equals 137, our 33rd prime, absolutely huge number. And it's why Trump got his Butler ear clip on 713, which we have down here in standard. 47, Trump the 45, 47 president. There's our August 22nd date. You know I'm watching that date. Our 11/22 JFK assassination date. 187. Remember all the different things that equals. Like Cuban power outage, which we just had the other day. Like Brotherhood of Death. Again, I literally just showed you in my video yesterday about 7/11 how huge that 7/11/91 eclipse was. And then bam, synchronicity brings it full circle as Bonnie Tyler, the singer of Total Eclipse of the Heart, dies the very next day. So, again, there you have it. Synchronicity at work. In fact, the town she died in, Faro, is also 137, this time in our hard to find matches Latin cipher. And there's our big 180. Remember how that connects to Davy Chase, to Final Destination, to the 1275. Now, instead of recapping any further, let's get back to what I was talking about at the end of yesterday's video, the Don't Fear the Reaper song by Blue Oyster Cult. I said there was one other film that I knew of in which the song played in, and that is X from 2022. X stars Mia Goth, who was formerly married to Shia LaBeouf, that idiot born on 6/11, the upside down 9/11. And she was born October 25th, 1993. In the film, her character Pearl stabs a guy in the neck repeatedly as the Don't Fear the Reaper song plays on a van radio. Well, continuing on with our football theme and our 1275 theme, remember this guy, Marshawn Kneeland, who played for the Dallas Cowboys and died on 11/6 last year. Again, the upside down 9/11. Don't forget he died in Frisco, Texas, which is the same place as that twin who got knifed supposedly. You know, that stupid story. Metcalf, I believe was his name. Well, Marshawn Kneeland is yet another 1275 in Latin, just like Blue Oyster Cult, just like It's the End Las Vegas, just like Jesus Christ. So Kneeland played in Texas and he died in Texas at the age of 24. Of course, X is the 24th letter of the alphabet. And the film X takes place in Texas. In fact, if we go from Mia Goth's birthday on October 25th, 1993 to the death of Kneeland, it's 11,700 days. What is 700 plus 11? 711. As if that wasn't damning enough, 32 years, 12 days. 32 plus 12 is your 44 kill number. Or you can consider this March 2nd plus 12 days would be 314. That's Pi Day. Remember the Pi Day eclipse. And that Pi Day eclipse equals that incredibly rare 666 in Latin. Don't forget also that Whiteman Air Force Base, which is 60 miles from Kansas City, which was used in the film Broken Arrow, was named after a guy who died in the Pearl Harbor attack, and X has a prequel, Pearl, set in the time of the Spanish flu. And I've shown this before, but always worth repeating. Pearl premiered on 9/3/2022. Of course, 9/3 is Claire Kramer's birthday. She played the Beast Glory in Buffy. And that was 1,191 days before the 84-year anniversary of Pearl Harbor. So to recap, the 3 films I know of that have Don't Fear the Reaper in them: The Frighteners, with Michael J. Fox, who is, of course, in the Back to the Future films, which Montegraph used to decode the 7-Eleven code. X, which, by the way, can also connect to the 2 solar eclipses that formed an X across the United States. And The Stand, which ends with Las Vegas being nuked. Again, Davy Chase from Las Vegas. And Michael Meyer, who was born 9,111 days before she died, plays for Las Vegas. And again, this is part 2. If any of this is confusing to you, make sure you watch part 1. That'll tell you all the stuff I'm talking about and why I'm talking about it. You can't watch part 2 without having watched part 1. Now, do you remember how they did a complete 180 on the cause of death of Davy Chase on the 180th day of the year? Remember how I talked about why they did that? Again, first they said it was meningitis, then the second time around they said it was AIDS. What is Shakira's official song for the World Cup? Die, Die, which is an anagram for aid, like AIDS. I guarantee you that's not a coincidence, and neither is the fact that this would be 4/19/419. Of course, what happened on 4/19/95, the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, this is not the first time she's done a theme song for the World Cup, as she did one for the 2010 World Cup called Waka Waka. Well, guess what? On July 11th, 2010, bombers who unalived themselves in the process detonated devices at 2 venues packed with fans watching the FIFA World Cup final. It says the coordinated attacks in the capital of Uganda killed 74 people. And of course, we just had the big 250 on 7/4. So the last time Shakira did a song for the World Cup, there were bombings on July 11th. Does that mean the same thing's going to happen this year? I guess we'll find out. Now, if we go from the day of those bombings in 2010 to 7/11 this year, it's exactly 192 months. Well, that's pretty damn crazy, because July 11th is the 192nd day of the year. So really, I think this more than speaks for itself. 192 is also the 148th composite. Of course, the 148th day of the year is May 28th, my birthday, Donnie Darko's birthday. And the 192nd composite is 246. The 246th day of the year is 9/3, Claire Kramer's birth date, the Pearl film's release date. Now, getting back to Michael Meyer, who plays for the Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs. Those 2 teams last played each other on January 4th of this year. Remember that T.S. Eliot died on 1/4 in the year 1965. And I've mentioned before that this is his famous quote. Not only is this his famous quote, but this is the opening shot of The Stand from 1994. The film in which Las Vegas gets nuked. The film that begins with Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper. Now this is the opening credit sequence from The Stand, as we see the lab where the super flu was created, and everyone in the lab has fallen victim to it as the virus has gotten loose. And this is when we hear Don't Fear the Reaper. Now, amidst all the dead in the lab and cafeteria areas of the military base, we see this. That is the game show Blackout, which was an American game show broadcast on CBS as part of its daytime schedule from January 4th to April 1st in the year 1988. Why was this game show that was born and died in 1988 in a 1994 film? For a few different reasons, I think, but in my opinion, the main reason is they used T.S. Eliot's quote, and he died on January 4th, and the game show began on January 4th. In fact, the show lasted for only a total of 88 days. And of course, it was in the year 88. 88 miles per hour. Again, Montegraph used the Back to the Future films to do his 7-Eleven decode. And 88 days just so happens to be 2 months and 28 days. Of course, the Iran War began on 2/28. It's also incredibly interesting to note that from T.S. Eliot's death to the start of Blackout, exactly 8,400 days. Again, 1984, very important because of the George Orwell 1984. Don't forget that Southland Tales, the incredibly coded film, also begins with T.S. Eliot's quote, albeit an inversion, as instead of the world ending with a whimper, as it originally says, in Southland Tales, they say it ends with a bang. So all of this, of course, brings me back around to January 4th, 2026, earlier this year, when the Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs last played each other. Going from that date to 7/11 this year, 188 days. That, of course, is Michelle Trachtenberg's number. Always huge. It's also 6 months, 7 days into the year, and 6/7 is 8/7 on the Roman calendar. Both Michael Meyer and Travis Kelce are number 87 for their respective teams. And this was the date they last played each other. 51.51% of 2026. Of course, that's our sacrifice date, May Day, twice. Or you can do 5 plus 1 is 6, 5 plus 1 is 6, 66. Twin number, last year of the Fire Horse. Now moving on, you know I've been finding a lot with the 9,111 codes recently. So I decided to go 9,111 days before 7/11 this year, and it landed on July 31st, 2001. Now, there wasn't a ton of news from that date for a change, but this article was specifically posted on this date. In fact, it was posted at 4:19 a.m. on that date. Of course, 4:19, again, Oklahoma City explosion. Boy 6 killed in freak MRI accident. Of course, there was an MRI scene in the most recent Final Destination film. It says a 6-year-old boy died after undergoing an MRI exam at a New York area hospital when the machine's powerful magnetic field jerked a metal oxygen tank across the room, crushing the child's head. Of course, it would be in New York. The canister fractured the skull and injured the brain of the young patient, Michael Colombini of Croton on Hudson, New York, during the procedure Friday. He died of the injuries on Sunday, the hospital said. Well, again, let me tell you, there's a reason this story took place in New York, because Croton on Hudson, where the boy was from, equals our 195. You know all that equals, from 11 skydivers to Trier Mega Zeppelin. Trump's Butler ear clip and Shannon Doherty's death date was the 195th day of 2024. Whiteman Air Force Base, also 195. And not only does this place equal 195, it also equals 1095, which is the 911th composite. So yeah, again, of course, this story would take place in New York. In fact, the divisors of 1095 sum up to 1776. And his head was crushed by a metal oxygen tank. We have our 74 again, our 1109, which is our backwards 9/11, our 1122 JFK death date, our 187 again, 61, the 18th prime, 18 of course is 666, 55 Satan number. Also, I almost forgot, the tagline for Broken Arrow, the film I talked about in my video yesterday, is prepare to go ballistic. In ordinal, that equals our 223, which of course is our backwards 322. And 223 is Emily Blunt's birthday. She played the Kansas City meteorologist in Disclosure Day. Also equals 317. Final Destination released on 317. 10 months and 2 days before Donnie Darko premiered on 1/19/2001. Of course, 10/2 is Frank's prophecy date in Donnie Darko. 317, of course, is the backwards 713, the big 137. And we have 119 in reverse reduction, the backwards 911. Remember that meningitis, which Davy Chase was originally said to have died from, equals 119. And Donnie Darko came out on 119 in the year 2001. Again, 10 months, 2 days after Final Destination released on 317. So both of their release dates right there next to each other. And we also have the 1338 in Sumerian, which again is the 1120th composite. Erica Franzve, born on 11/20 in the year 88. And the 1120th prime number is 9011. So how interesting that the tagline for Broken Arrow is prepare to go ballistic. Broken Arrow connects so heavily to the 7/11 codes, and this story was just in the news. Ukraine couldn't stop a Russian ballistic missile barrage. Officials say Patriot interceptors are running out. Now, I'm going to get slightly off topic for a moment here, although really it's still on topic considering I've been mentioning Davy Chase throughout this video. Larry Silverstein officially signed the historic 99-year lease for the World Trade Center complex on July 24th, 2001. Who was born on July 24th, 1990? None other than Davy Chase. We all know that Silverstein did this. I, however, did not realize it was July 24th. That just lends even further importance to why they sacrificed Davy Chase. This, of course, was her 11th birthday in the year of 9/11. The same year, football player Michael Meyer was born on 7/6, the 9/11 president's birthday, 9,111 days before Davy Chase would eventually die. In fact, if you want to bring it right back around to the actual topic of the video, 9,111 days after Silverstein did that was July 4th, the big 250-year anniversary of the country, further lending credence that we are in store for another 9/11 style event very, very soon. And again, I would not have even found this if Google AI wasn't so shoddy, because when I was looking for what was 9,111 days before 7/11 this year in the Google AI section, which I never trust, by the way, it said that is when Silverstein did this. I, of course, double checked, and it was actually 7/24. Even more damning, given that that's Davy Chase's birth date, and that 9,111 days later was the 250th anniversary of the United States. Beyond damning, in my opinion. And by the way, do you remember that Davy Chase was in the ring where anyone who watched the cursed VHS tape, she would call them on the telephone and tell them 7 days, implying that they only had 7 days to live? Well, 7/11 just so happens to be 7 days after July 4th. Again, not that I'm saying anything's actually going to happen, but believe me, between what I'm finding and what Montegraph has found, the coding is absolutely there. The rituals are absolutely there. So if nothing else, you can see what they're doing through our videos. It's not always about the events themselves, but about the rituals and the coding. And I almost forgot something I mentioned in Montegraph's chat. 7/11, of course, has the big gulp. Big gulp just so happens to equal 7/4. America about to take a big gulp very soon. We also have a 444 in Sumerian, half of our 888 B system number, 223 in primes, 26 in Chaldean. Of course, we'd have our 26 in there. And of course, I can't not mention that the big gulp was first introduced in 1976 by Dennis Potts. 1976 was 50 years ago. So the country was 200 years old when the big gulp was introduced. And now we're 250 years old. And we have all these 7/11 codes. Again, big gulp equals 7/4. And again, I'm trying to remember every single connection. There are just so many that it's hard to remember all of them. With Arrowhead Stadium, they made a naming rights deal with Jiha Field, which equals 57. Of course, Michelle Trachtenberg died on 2/26, the 57th day of the year, and 5/7 is the 127th day of the year, like 127, Buildings 127, or 12/7 Pearl Harbor, and we have our upside down 9/11/01 number here. Just Jiha, the number they made the deal with, gives us a 5/22 over here. Of course, that is the Gift Tower Sacrifice air date, Irina Zarutska's birth date. Also, remember how I mentioned the nuke in Denver via the Sum of All Fears book in my previous video about 7/11? In 1990, in a game against the Denver Broncos, the Chiefs were threatened with a penalty if the crowd would not quiet down. That's pretty crazy. Of course, we all know that these stupid sports are rigged. Just more nonsense to make more of a spectacle out of it. And while the FIFA World Cup is going on, the stadium is currently renamed temporarily Kansas City Stadium, which just so happens to equal 250 in reverse. Due to FIFA protocol concerning stadium names, the stadium was temporarily named Kansas City Stadium. What are the odds that that would equal 250 right after the big 250? And of course, I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't mention the huge fact that groundbreaking on the stadium was on July 11th, 1968. That, of course, was 57 years ago. You know how big the 57 number is. July 11th, really. And, of course, 1968 is the year of 2001, A Space Odyssey, the year Timothy McVeigh was born. Of course, we're right at the tail end of that 57 years, as on July 11th it will be 58 years. Of course, 58, its own huge number. Also, 21,184 days. Remember that Irina Zarutska equals 184 in gematria. And 184 plus 21 equals 205. Davy Chase, born on the 205th day of the year, which is also the date that Silverstein took out that policy on the Twin Towers. Irina Zarutska, the World Trade Center, Davy Chase, all absolutely huge sacrifices. It's also 696 months. Of course, you can flip the 9 and have a 666. Also at Arrowhead Stadium in 1991, 2 Diamond Vision screens shaped as footballs were installed. No exact date was given, but again, any date in 1991 to the same date this year will be 12,784 days. And Diamond Vision equals our 888 B system number. Also our 77, of course 7 times 11 is 77. Of course, anytime you get your 888, you get your 148. We have our 1122 down here. Our 67 backwards 76. And now, since I accidentally stumbled upon when Silverstein took out that policy on the World Trade Center, going from that date to 7/11 this year is 9,118 days. Of course, 118 plus 9 is 127, like Buildings 127, like our Pearl Harbor date. And again, since that was on Davy Chase's 11th birthday, going from Davy Chase's actual birth to 7/11 this year, 13,136 days. 136 plus 13 is 149. The 149th day of the year is JFK's birthday, Riley Keough's birthday. Of course, from Riley Keough's name, you can get the word nuke. Also, 131 plus 36 is 167, and Davy Chase died on the 167th day of the year. And March 5th plus 11 plus 17 would be April 2nd. 4/2 is 162 days before 9/11. Of course, the 162nd day of the year is 6/11, your upside down 9/11. Which reminds me, on 4/2/2001, of course, there was the death of Jennifer Syme. You know how I feel about that. I believe that Keanu sacrificed her. Keanu was born on 9/2/1964. 4/2 is the 92nd day of the year. From Keanu's birth to 7/11 this year is 22,592 days. 592 plus 22 just so happens to equal 614. That is Trump's birthday, of course. And just like with Riley Keough, you can get nuke with Keanu. In fact, his whole name is an anagram for nuke. And don't forget Neo's passport. And down here we have 61 years, 10 months, 9 days. 6/11 forwards, 9/11 backwards, which is the exact same thing if you were to turn it upside down. Because 6/11 is the upside down 9/11. And 2 final things to show to end this part 2. From the Gift Tower Sacrifice air date on May 22nd, 2001 to 7/11 this year, 9,182 days. 182 plus 9 is 191. Of course, that's basically our 9/11 numbers. But also, 1 plus 8 plus 2 is 11, 9/11. You know how absolutely incredibly important that episode is. Also, consider this February 5th plus 1 plus 20, and it would be 226. Michelle from The Gift died on 226. And 301 plus 20, of course, is 321. Remember, that's the 254th composite. 254th day of the year is 9/11. Remember that Manhattan equals 321 in Latin. And again, since I just heard of her death as soon as I got in here to make this video, Bonnie Tyler's song, Total Eclipse of the Heart, was released on 2/11/1983. From that date to 7/11 this year, which of course again is the date that the big eclipse in 1991 on 7/11 will turn 12,784 days old. 521 months. 521 is the 141st day of the year. 141, the number that World War III equals. 2265 weeks, 1 day. That is your 226 Michelle Trachtenberg death date, combined with your 5/1 sacrifice date. So yes, I'm not sure if I'll do a part 3. Maybe. It depends on what else I find in my notes. But do check out Monograph's channel. I've been watching him for very close to 20 years now. In fact, I joined YouTube the same exact year that he did, 2006. Although I did not start making videos until much, much later, of course. Here's some of his 7/11 videos. But anyway, we'll see what happens. All glory to God, and thank you for watching.